Have you ever found yourself staring at a massive block of spreadsheet data, unsure how to make sense of it? What if you had the power to turn those endless rows and columns into engaging visual stories? We'll teach you how as we close out our Spreadsheet Fundamentals series by looking at basic forms of data visualization in spreadsheets, today on Art+Science. Hey there, I'm Kevin Hartman, Associate Professor at the University of Notre Dame and founder of the Art+Science Analytics Institute, where our mission is to make you a better data analyst. We're wrapping up our Spreadsheet Fundamentals series by looking at basic forms of data visualization in spreadsheets. The cleaning and transformations that we've learned how to do in previous videos have led us to this point where we can now start to unlock the stories held in our data. In this video, we will explore the various ways spreadsheets can visually represent data. This includes traditional methods such as graphs and charts, as well as the introduction of eye-catching contrast using conditional formatting techniques. We'll also cover how to create data summaries and aggregations using pivot tables, and to top it all off, we'll teach you a lesser-known but highly effective visualization method called Sparklines. Before we dive in, let's briefly talk about the reason why we visualize data and what we as data analysts are looking for when we transform raw data into visuals. To put it simply, we visualize data in the hopes of finding 5 distinct patterns. Each one tells a story. Recognizing and interpreting these patterns is essential for making well-informed decisions and effectively sharing our findings. Let's take a closer examination of the 5 fundamental patterns now. Each of the 5 patterns you see here uncovers a unique and valuable insight. Now, we don't walk into a data set expecting to find all 5 of these. We drive our analysis by a hypothesis, a question, and one of these patterns will answer that question. So we go in with a very specific idea of finding one of them. Let me walk through each of the 5 now for you. Change refers to trends or instances where observations differ over time. This pattern helps us track progress, identify growth or decline, and forecast future behavior. Clustering is a technique used to group data points based on their similarities or their differences. This method is helpful in identifying natural clusters within our data, which can reveal hidden patterns and connections. Relativity involves examining observations in relation to or in proportion with something else. This concept is crucial for comprehending context and drawing valuable comparisons. Ranking involves placing items in a specific order according to their level of achievement or status. This method is beneficial for evaluating and organizing data based on particular standards. Finally, correlation is the analysis of how 2 or more variables are related to each other. This can help us understand potential cause and effect connections and patterns within these variables. By identifying these patterns, we are able to turn unprocessed information into engaging visual stories that inspire understanding. Now, these 5 take on many visual forms, but at its root, there are 5 distinct patterns that we are looking for, each of them telling a unique story. This is where visualization becomes valuable, as it allows us to uncover these hidden patterns in data, which are difficult to find when data is locked in a massive block of rows and columns. As we'll soon discover, these patterns can often easily be revealed through visual forms like charts and graphs, but narratives can also emerge when data is compiled and converted into descriptive statistics and summary tables. This is why spreadsheets are so valuable to data analysts. They allow data to be visualized in various ways, and they can also manipulate and combine data very effectively and very efficiently. In fact, there are 3 primary ways spreadsheets help us find patterns in data, and we'll explore all of them in this video. The first is just basic visualizations. Spreadsheets offer a range of basic visualization tools such as bar charts, line charts, pie charts, scatter plots. All of these help us identify and understand patterns within the data. The second is the application of contrast. Contrast is a very powerful visual tool because it enhances clarity, it highlights key patterns, it directs attention, and simplifies complex information, making data accessible and understandable, and it's very easy to achieve through things like conditional formatting in a spreadsheet. Calculations and transformations are another way that spreadsheets help us visualize data. They excel in performing complex calculations and data transformations. They enable us to manipulate and analyze data in various ways, allowing for in-depth analysis and data aggregation. Now, we will have many, many more videos on this channel that delve deeply into all the nuances of data storytelling. But this video will focus on the primary ways that you can use spreadsheets as a data visualization tool. As with all of our videos, there is a step-by-step guide linked in the description below so that you can easily follow along with the tasks that we're demonstrating or practice them afterwards on your own. Also, we will be demoing in Google Sheets, although all of the functions work nearly the same way in Excel, and we'll point out when there is any important differences. Let's get into the data and learn how to visualize it with spreadsheets. So here I am in my spreadsheet. This is the same data that I've been using for the entire Spreadsheet Fundamentals series. It is a transaction log from a school that offers courses in 3 different modes. Courses that are delivered online, courses that are delivered live in person, and then courses that are hybrid, a combination of both live and online, labeled as both. I've got my unique customer ID for each transaction, the order ID, the unique ID of that transaction, date through a number of different ways and variations here, the spend, the amount of money that each of those courses cost, then the class type, both the original data that was input as well as the standardized labels that I came to in the cleanup visual videos that we did earlier on, as well as the zip code that I pulled in for each customer and some summary data. The first thing I want to do is just demonstrate how easy it is to create a chart in a spreadsheet. I simply click into the data table that I want to visualize. I go under Insert, click on Chart, and boom, I've got a chart. So this is an automatically generated chart with no input from me. The system just produces it. Let's take a closer look at this chart now. 3 words immediately come to mind when I think about how to describe this chart. The first is automatic. Google Sheets and Excel have the ability to generate charts automatically based on the data in your spreadsheet. And this feature will save you time and effort. It makes it very convenient to quickly visualize data without having to build visualizations from scratch. And with just a few clicks, you get an initial representation of the data. The second word is awful. This is an awful chart. While the automatically generated charts in spreadsheets is a very useful feature, the default output often leaves much to be desired, like this chart here. This chart suffers from minimal stylistic adaptations. It lacks a clear set of data markers or annotations, has poor formatting, such as redundant labels. Notice that the date variable has been plotted on both the X and the Y axes. It makes 0 sense. These problems can result in visually unappealing and potentially confusing charts like the one you see here. But the third important word is adaptable. Although it has flaws, an automatically generated chart can be easily customized and fixed. The flexibility of charting in spreadsheets allows for adjustments to labels and colors and schemes and all sorts of different elements. And with just a little bit of effort, like you will learn in this video today, what may have started as an unappealing and confusing chart can be transformed into a useful data visualization pretty easily. So there are ways to customize, certainly, this chart. One disadvantage to raw transaction data is that while there's a lot there, the raw data doesn't really suit itself to these traditional visualizations. You'd have to aggregate or summarize it in some way before you have something that really is suitable for visualization. And luckily, if I just delete this chart out and scroll to the right, I've done a lot of that summarization in our earlier videos. So I've got here this little table that we built, which has the number of classes by class type, that live, online, and both hybrid, as well as the amount of revenue that was generated by the school for each class type. This is something that I may want to visualize. So I just begin by highlighting it. And what this is going to produce for me is a chart that helps me understand which of the class types I sold most frequently and how much revenue each one generated relative to one another. Again, I just highlight that table, I click into Insert, I go under Chart, and there I've got a chart. Now, there's some customization that I need to do, and you'll see to the right a panel pops open that allows me to start to modify this chart. The setup piece allows me to choose what kind of chart visual I want to, the visual form that I want to use, allows me to do some other things as well, like choose the different data that I want to visualize. I'm fine with these series. These are the two series of data that I want to show. The only problem that I've got is that number of class types doesn't appear on the visual. Why is that? Because both of them, number and the spend, are being plotted on a single axis, and the scale is just too far out of whack. The amount of money is a factor of 1,000 when compared to the number of classes, or at least a few hundred. So what I need to do is separate those two data series to two different axes, present one on the right axis and the other on the left axis. And that'll allow me to change the scale on each so that I can at least create a visual that has all the data appear on the table. How do I do that? Well, that's under the Customize. And here, I've got different things like style choices I can make and the colors that I'm using. I can add titles and axis labels. What I'm interested in, though, is this series. And now you can see that the series has applied one axis to all the data series in the chart. I can choose the two of them. I'm going to look at, let's say, the number of class type, and indeed that is on the left axis, as I see at the bottom. That's okay. My number of classes are going to be to the left side when the chart, when the two side-by-side columns are presented. So I want to keep that on the left axis. What I want to do, though, is take this spend, and instead of having it on the left axis, I want to change that simply to the right axis. And now, boom, what that has done is created two different axes with two different scales so that I can at least visually see the number of classes in blue and the spend in red. Now, because they're different scales, they're not completely comparable, right? But at least in a relative sense now, I can see how they compare to one another, how the categories, live compares to both compares to online, in the number of classes and in the class, the amount of spend, revenue that was generated. And that's really easy to do just through those customizations. So creating the charts is super easy. It's as easy as just inserting a chart. Where the fun comes in is the customization of that chart. So learning those setup variables, learning the customization, customized setups will help you create these charts really quickly and efficiently. And all it takes is just a little practice there. So let's move on to the second tab now and explore conditional formatting. As the name implies, conditional formatting will change the formatting of a cell based on what is contained in that cell and the conditions that I put around that in some rules that I write. So in this spreadsheet, I think the best thing to visualize in this way would be the spend. And what I'm hoping to do, because I've got three different levels of spend, the $199 online course, the $299 live course, or that $399 hybrid course, I just want to create a visual way for me to really easily understand when each type of class is being sold. So I simply highlight the entire column because I want to write a rule that affects all of them. I go under Format, go to Conditional Formatting, and up pops to the right a panel which allows me now to start building these conditions and the rules for the cells. It begins with a single color default. That's not what I want. I want to change at least 3 different colors. So I'm going to go to Color Scheme, the option there. And rather than having the white, the light green shades, I'm going to go to one that has 3 distinct colors. I see this one here with a green, yellow, and red. I'm going to choose that. And now what it's done is it's created a minimum value, which it gives a green color. The 50th percentile, so right in the midpoint, it's making yellow. The max red. So you can do that if you have a continuous string of data, and it'll kind of figure out what's high, what's low, what's average. This can be really, really helpful if you're just looking at data and want to understand Is that figure in the middle somewhere? Is it at the top of the range, the low end of the range? So you can use these midpoints and these values to drive that distinction. I want to be very specific here because I know I've got 3 different price points. So I'm going to change this minimum value to a number, and that number is going to be $199. Those are my online courses. I'm going to change this midpoint from percentage to number, and that one I'm going to change to $299, which is the live courses. And then as I come down here to the max value, I'm going to change this one to a specific number as well, and I want that to be $399. That is the hybrid courses. So now I've got a visual way to see an online course, which pops up as green, a live course, which pops up as yellow, and then the red ones, which indicate where hybrid, these both types of courses, have been sold. And visually now, I can make sense of those data rather than just staring at this long line, long column of numbers. Now, through the conditional formatting and the contrast that's introduced, I can see these patterns and trends really easily. Moving on, let's look at pivot tables now. Pivot tables are these tremendously powerful tools that can take massive amounts of data, locked in rows and columns, and transform it very, very easily. In fact, give you any view, any look into the data that you would really want. Let me show you how easy they are to create and how powerful they can be. To start, all I really need to do is click into one of the cells in the table that I want to summarize using a pivot table, and then go under Insert and Pivot Table, and up pops the data range. This is the entire data range, the full table. It'll automatically select the whole thing. If there's just a portion, I can change that data range if there's just a smaller portion of the table that I want to analyze, but typically you want the entire set of data. You then have the option of building a pivot table inside the existing sheet, in which you just need to tell the spreadsheet where you want that pivot table placed, or into a new sheet. The challenge with doing it in an existing sheet, if you've got a lot of data already, it just gets kind of messy and difficult to manage. So the best practice is just to say, create this in a new sheet. I'll go ahead and select new sheet, hit create, and there is the pivot table framework. Now, what you've got are the rows, columns, and values, which you'll see populated as you start to move data into the pivot table. And over to the right is all the data that I have available to me. This is each of the elements, each of the variables in my spreadsheet. And then the places I can place these data, rows, columns, values, and then make some filters out of the data as well. It's as simple then as just dragging and dropping those data elements into the various areas, and you'll see it populate. So let's say I want to take this period and make those the rows. I just drag it over and drop it, and so you'll see in my pivot table, I have all 12 of the periods contained in those data now aggregated up. The columns, well, why don't we make that the class type standardized? I'm going to drop and drag that there. Now I've got this framework where I have period down the rows and the 3 different types of class type across the top, and places that will display the totals there as well as soon as I enter the values. And the values that I want to use here is, I think most commonly, most obviously, the spend. Drop that in, and now what you're looking at is a report that says for each period, how much revenue, how much spend was generated for each class type, as well as totals. I mean, this is the data that was contained in that massive spreadsheet, but there's no way I could have come to this understanding by just looking at that block of data. So this is the kind of summarization and transformation that we need to do, that now we can start to visualize and create some patterns that we can communicate to others really effectively. But really not until I create this summary view using something powerful like a pivot table. There's a lot of different elements and customization that can be done here as well, aside from the fact that I could have dropped any of those data elements into these different areas. Once they're in, and if I just look at my spend, for instance, it'll default to summing that. I could have looked for the average of each, which doesn't make any sense because I know they all cost the same, so the average is going to be the same. I could have looked at a count of each just to see how many of those different course types were sold each period. The one that makes the most sense, again, is sum, what it defaulted to, but there's this whole variety of different views that I can create with this pivot table. So these pivot tables allow me to take all this data that I've got in a raw form and create these summary views that help me make sense of those data very quickly. Finally, today, let's look at a seldom used but really interesting visualization technique called Sparklines. Now, what Sparklines are mini charts that get compressed into a single cell in a spreadsheet. Now, there's not a lot of detail, but that's the point of a Sparkline. It's just so that you can follow the flow of the data. There's no place for you to put labels, no place for you to put annotations or anything like that. It's not a real deep storytelling visual, but what it allows us to do is very quickly get a sense for our numbers moving in the right direction or are they moving in the wrong direction. These are tools that are used in executive dashboards very effectively or in reports to summarize great massive amounts of data, and it could not be easier to produce. What I've done is I've taken the pivot table output that we created in the previous section, and I've just added some labeling here next to where I'm going to put a sparkline. And in Google Sheets, creating a sparkline is a simple command. In Excel, it's just a selection of a button. But here, next to where it's I've labeled it both spend, I just trigger this function by typing sparkline. And then I simply select the data that I want to include in my sparkline. And there you go. I've got a mini chart that is mapping that spend over time. I move on, I'm going to do the same now. Sparkline for the live revenue, on to Sparkline for the online revenue, and then finally Sparkline for the grand total. And there you are. I've got 3 nifty mini charts that I can use to just really quickly visually get a sense for what's going on in my business. I can see that all of my course types suffered a pretty dramatic cut in revenue in that second month, and it was consistent across all 3 different types. At the end of the year, my live spend seemed to move up, where my online spend and my both spend took a bit of a dive. That's an interesting pattern that I can reveal here. Now, this is not a very detailed graph, obviously, so it's going to take more investigation, but that's the point of these sparklines, are just to initiate some thought, open some questions, and keep you in touch with the data as it's moving in a very simple way. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, take a moment and subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with anyone that you think is interested in data analytics. Every single week, we are bringing new, exciting, and important videos on data analytics. We would love to have you there for the journey. Also, be sure to check out the links in the description for additional Art+Science resources and sign up for our newsletter to get exclusive tips, course updates, and more directly in your inbox. Look for the next video where we will apply the fundamentals we've learned in this series in ways that produce insightful analyses. Thank you again for watching. We'll see you in the next video.